Namaskar, good evening. One country, two envoys. That's what's facing the posh Afghan embassy located in Chanakyapuri in New Delhi. Hello and welcome to Study IQ IAS English. I am Bhuvan Apurvajha. As today in this video, we take a look at the conundrum that the Afghani embassy in New Delhi is faced with. We also take a look at the Taliban outreach towards India and what has caused this sudden change in mood and behavior on part of Taliban towards India. And then finally, we explore as to what should India's response be in engaging or not engaging Taliban, depending on the position that one chooses and the arguments that one chooses to make. Once again, welcome to this special video as we begin off first with understanding the facts of the case. Now, the Afghanistan Embassy in New Delhi, which is led by the incumbent Ambassador Farid Mamundzai, well, his position is in threat. Why? Because Taliban has announced a new envoy for the Afghanistan Embassy in New Delhi. Now, please remember that the incumbent Ambassador Farid Mamundzai, well, he was appointed by the Ashraf Ghani government that was overthrown or that fell or that collapsed in 2021. Now, as recently as yesterday, the Taliban has confirmed Qadir Shah, who was positioned as the trade counselor at the Afghan embassy in New Delhi. Well, he has been named as the new ambassador to India. Now, this has also been confirmed by the chief of political office of the Taliban in Doha, who have termed the move, and believe it or not, as rational, one that will push for better ties with India. Now, Ambassador Farid Mamundzai, the incumbent, well, he has refused to relinquish charge. Why? Because India does not recognize Taliban like the other countries across the world. At the same time, India is caught in a catch-22 situation, which is why India has straight away said, you know what, it's your internal matter, it's the internal matter of the Afghanistan government, and it's for them to figure it out. Simultaneously, at the same time, yesterday, the Afghanistan incumbent Ambassador Farid Mamundzai, he released a statement saying all of this was baseless, that the person who has been appointed has no locus standi, and that he will continue to function in the role of ambassador of Afghanistan to India. Indeed, a difficult situation not just for the Afghanistan embassy, but also for the Indian government insofar as engaging or not engaging with this new entity is concerned. This is the particular letter that was put out by the Afghanistan ambassador yesterday, which essentially says that the new person who has been named as the charge d'affaires, well, he has been spreading misinformation and running a baseless and unsubstantiated campaign against the office of the ambassador. At the same time, he reiterates his commitment to serve the interests of Afghanistan and India, and that he will be staying on in his current role. This letter that was published by Ambassador Farid Mamundzai, well, that's doing the rounds in social media throughout the day. Moving forward, so first we need to understand the facts of the case. Well, no country so far has recognized the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan as the legitimate successor to the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Now, the Taliban operates under the name Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. So as of last month, April 2023, Taliban appointees for embassy have been accredited by Iran, Pakistan, Russia and Turkmenistan. Only these four nations, along with UAE and Qatar, who have in fact recognized the Talibani envoy in some sort or the other. Why has the Indian international community boycotted Taliban? Well, for amongst the different reasons that one can think of, violence, deprivation, large-scale destruction, all of that put aside, well, one major concern is that the Taliban regime in Afghanistan practices discrimination in its extreme form against women and children, especially when it comes to education and employment. Now, at the same time, Taliban now is trying to dehyphenate itself from the other stakeholders in the region. Now, you might ask me, who are the other stakeholders in the region? Well, the great game of Afghanistan involves a different number of stakeholders. Number one, obviously, is Pakistan. Number 2, a recent entrant in this field, China. Thereafter, you have had the usual ones, US and Russia. But now the time for India has come. India is also supposed to play a pivotal role in Afghanistan. We'll see how it can play in this video going forward. So, having said that, now with all that information delivered to your desktops and your tablets, what's most peculiar is that here is Taliban now trying to court India. Here is Taliban now trying to catch the attention of the Indian government. Now one might ask, why? What changed all of a sudden? Was it not the same Taliban who in fact gave safe harbour to the hijackers of IC-814 amongst a long list of problems that have encountered with India over the years? Well, at this moment, we are not sure of the spectrum of Indian engagement with Taliban. What we do know is that India's strategy is limited. So far as only humanitarian assistance program is concerned, India did send close to 50,000 metric tons of wheat to Afghanistan via the land route in Pakistan when the country was grappling with severe food shortage. India also delivered close to 5 lakh co-vaccines when the country was grappling with COVID-19 pandemic. So, all this said and done, India has essentially been looking at the humanitarian assistance, looking at it from that perspective. But at the same time, India has made it very clear that the regime in Afghanistan has to be inclusive and has to represent the will of the Afghan people. In that backdrop, we have Taliban now suddenly reaching out and appointing an envoy to New Delhi. Surely, it has to be seen as an outreach by this entity, and we have to try and understand what has caused them to react and behave this way. Going forward, so what explains Taliban's outreach? Number 1, we will take a look at the Taliban-Pakistan equation. What changes has been there in that relationship now that Taliban is behaving in a completely different manner? We will also take a look at the Taliban-China relationship, whether it is all hunky-dory, all beds of roses, or as that relationship also turns sour. And finally, we'll take a look at the Taliban-India relationship and whether indeed a new page is being turned insofar as relations between these two entities is concerned, or indeed have we reached status quo, a stalemate. First up, let's go in straight to understand the equation and the relationship between Taliban and Pakistan. Now, Taliban's leadership's desire to assert its independence from Pakistan has been made abundantly clear by its support of the TTP, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which has been targeting opposition parties in Pakistan at a large scale. You have had the TTP that has been against, say, the PMLN or the PPP. In fact, saying that they are going to be targeting Pakistani institutions in the coming days. Post the ceasefire again, here's a very interesting statistic for you. Post the ceasefire in 2021, now the attack by the TTP, which is an offshoot of the Taliban, the Afghan Taliban, well, that number has skyrocketed. The attack has increased, the number of attacks have increased by close to 50%. At the same time, Taliban has sought to increase its domestic legitimacy by appealing to Pashtun nationalism. Pashtun nationalism there, in that part of the world, does not identify or recognize boundaries. Tribal connect, and tribal connect is much more deeper than, say, a transboundary connects at all. Which is why now it's becoming a source of headache for Pakistan. The snake that was reared by Pakistan is now coming to bite it back. In that context, we have to understand the history of that particular area. Now, the problem with that particular area is the Durand Line. Another gift of the colonial rule that has been bestowed upon the Indian subcontinent, the Durand Line has been a source of contention between Taliban and Pakistan. Now, the primary target of Taliban has been, as I said, the Durand Line, the British demarcated line, the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan, which Taliban refuses to recognize. Now that causes headaches not just in Pakistan, but also in the other stakeholders around the area. At the same time, the Taliban's actions have historical resonance. It's not something that they thought of today. It's not that they decided suddenly, you know what, we are going to usurp Kabul and then we are going to say Durand Line, we don't believe in it. No. It's something that has been a continuous part of their thought process, of their ideology. So, at this moment, let's realize that traditionally, most Afghan leaders have refused to recognize Durand Line. Why? Because the dream of creating a Pashtunistan, a state that will comprise Pakistan's more than 35 million strong Pashtun population, is in the works. That's what Taliban wants. Like I told you, in that part of the world, boundaries don't mean a lot. Tribal to tribal connect is one that is a lot more stronger than any other bond there. So, Pakistan's belief of Afghanistan's Taliban being a strategic asset, as their military generals and their selected politicians would like us to believe, that they are a strategic asset and that they provide strategic depth for Pakistan. Well, one can surely argue the fact that, well, it's not strategic depth for Pakistan, more like strategic death for Pakistan. Right? So at the same time, this whole belief of Pakistan that you need to have a friendly puppet government, no matter whatever wrongdoings they are doing, let them do, will turn a face away to it. Well, now that strategy has backfired, and backfired big time for Pakistan. Moving forward, now we go on to understand the relationship between the other stakeholder in this conversation, the PRC and Taliban. Now, if you just go back with me a bit, when Taliban had just overthrown the Ashraf Ghani government in 2021, there was a lot of hue and cry that China will come and fill in the vacuum created by the departure of the United States of America. A lot of articles and op-eds and debates were held, vociferous debates saying, you know what, China is coming next door. Well, none of that has happened so far. Why? Because again, you have had Beijing that is very wary of this particular area. Yes, Beijing at this moment is yet to provide Taliban with the two things that Taliban really craves. Number one, international recognition. Well, that has not come from Beijing yet. And number two, foreign investment. As much as the press would like you to believe that China is pumping money into Afghanistan, making it the next specter, the next theater of the great game, well, none of that is true. In fact, since the overthrow of Ashraf Ghani in 2021, only 540 million of oil project has been pledged by China. The operative word being pledged. Yes, nothing has concretized so far. And when you go back in history, you will see that previous such projects have yet to take off. They are just left to be rotting on the mere paper that they have been printed on. So, why is China so anxious about going into Afghanistan? Of course, they are a belligerent power. It would make sense for them to go in there, considering that BRI, the Belt and Road project, the initiative, the dream project of the Chinese premier goes through that particular area. Well, it's because, again, the Chinese president or the Chinese emperor had once quoted, "Avoid dangerous and turmoiled places, especially when it comes to Chinese investments." The Chinese are quite calculated and calibrated in making sure that the money they put gives them some tangible returns. Well, Afghanistan is in a state of flux. There is no political stability. And at the same time, the regime that is in charge there isn't exactly pro-China. You will understand why. So going forward now, that's why the Taliban essentially gravitated towards India. They did go first to China, but then China being China said no. So now they have come to India. Pakistan, obviously, I will not expand much there because really they don't have much to offer economy-wise. So where has China been hurt by Taliban? Well, militants have targeted Chinese projects in Afghanistan, right? Including the TPP and the Balochistan Liberation Army. Indeed, the Taliban does provide logistical and material support to these organizations, much to the anguish and anger of the PRC. Now, if I were to just take you back to a recent United Nations Security Council report in 2022, which says that Taliban provides sanctuary to Uyghur Turkestan Islamic Party, the TIP. Now, regular watchers and regular followers of Chinese media and Chinese policy will understand that that's a line crossed. Especially when it comes to the Uyghur population, especially when it comes to anything that China is accused of, well, China goes on the defensive, or China straight away cuts contact there, cuts ties there. The fact that Taliban is providing a safe harbor to militants of the TIP has rubbed China the wrong way. At the same time, you have the Taliban versus the Khorasan province ISKP, the duel that is playing itself out in the realms of Afghanistan, and TIP there has sided with Taliban. In fact, they helped the Uyghur population there, helped the Taliban consolidate power in Kabul. At this moment, you can understand why Beijing is wary of Kabul. You can understand why they are taking a back seat, which explains why suddenly this renewed love for India from Taliban. Going forward, so with that story being told to you that Pakistan is not a factor, especially given that they have messed up their own game, China, well, it's on the back seat right now. Would you say that this would be the right time for India to take a more proactive step insofar as engaging with Taliban is concerned? Would that be something that you agree with or disagree with? Please do let me know in the comment box below. Going forward, now with the results of the China pivot that the Taliban was hoping for, well, that having spectacularly failed, the Taliban now have sought to repair the relationship with India. So, the same projects, the same Indian projects that were threatened by the Taliban during the takeover, well, guess what? They have come back saying, please, can the Indians start working again on those projects? At the same time, they have said, can the Indians also allow Afghan men and women to come and train with our military? As you would know that Afghan friendly nations and their citizens are trained in, say, the IMA or in LBSNA, all of these different institutions, you have training facilities for individuals from friendly foreign nations. Well, that was stopped after Ashraf Ghani government fell. Now, the Taliban has requested for people-to-people engagement to be increased at this particular, a definite signal of outreach from this entity in Afghanistan. So, what should India do at this moment becomes the question. What's in it for India, in fact, you might say, to go into Afghanistan? Well, number one, and most importantly, you will be disrupting the strategic depth policy of Pakistan that has been in place since Cold War. Essentially, the Pakistanis would install a friendly regime, a pliable regime in Afghanistan and use it to counter India so that India cannot surround Pakistan from both sides. The strategic depth can be negated right now, especially with a strong political will from the side of India. At the same time, like I told you, it's a fantastic opportunity to go toe-to-toe with China, especially in Afghanistan, which is often known as the graveyard of the ego of massive countries. Well, maybe it's time indeed for India and China not to face off militarily, say in the Himalayas, but probably play it out in Afghanistan to see which power has the more better scope of engaging with Taliban for mutual benefit. At the same time, you have the Taliban that frequently hobnobs with the Lashkar-e-Toiba, the Jaish-ul-Mohammed, Haqqani network, all of these, etc. Taliban frequently engages with them. Now, these are the same entities, organizations outlawed by India, from which India faces the most threat. Would it not make sense for India to engage with them at least on a semi-official basis? Obviously, official basis can be ruled out completely. It wouldn't make sense. We are a democratic elected country after all, and these are terrorist organizations. However, would you rather be safe having a sort of semi-official contact with these organizations so that you can ameliorate the chances of any future happening? A point of understanding can be reached between these two organizations. So, going forward, before I wrap up this small video on the recent happenings around the Afghan embassy and the larger context of India, Taliban, China and Pakistan, my dear viewer, I'd like to put two questions to you. Number one, now although the players at this moment might be different, the great game for Afghanistan continues and it will continue. And can India afford, like I told you, to sit out? Should India sit this one out, or should India go ahead and go in with the policy of engaging with the Afghans, with the Taliban and making sure that our mutual interests are served? And number two, the Taliban takeover has not negated the factors that made Afghanistan important to India, but has only amplified it. Especially if you're looking from the mains perspective, this becomes a question for you to analyze critically. Right? With that, we come to the end of this particular video where we discussed the four stakeholders in the great game that's playing out currently in 2023. Do let me know in the comment box below if you like this video, if there's something different that you would like discussed, if there's any particular topic that you would like me to discuss. Please reach out to me in the comment box below, or my email ID is here. I'd be more than happy to engage with you directly. Once again, thanks